Hello Year 7 and welcome to your next geography lesson on air pressure. The purpose of this video is to go through the tasks that you will be doing in this lesson in a little bit more detail. Now you might choose to not watch this video yet and watch it as you're completing the tasks, or you might choose to watch it now and then come back to the video as you are completing the tasks. Now the tasks that I'm going to focus on is task 2 and task 3 and task 4. So let's start. So in this lesson we're going to be looking at what air pressure is. So we're going to be writing a definition for air pressure, and then we're going to be looking at the differences between high pressure and low pressure, and looking at what type of weather low pressure brings and what type of weather high pressure brings. So let's start the lesson. So what is air pressure? Well, air pressure is a force pressing down on us, and due to the weight of the atmosphere, when air is rising, there is less force pushing down on us, and then when air is falling, it's sinking and air pressure rises. So when air is rising, the air pressure is very low. And when air is sinking, the air pressure is very high. So there are two types of air pressure that we need to be aware of. Low pressure and high pressure. And you can see here on these figures, the figure on the right is what you might see whenever you're watching the weather. And they show you areas of where we have high pressure and areas of low pressure. But first of all, we need to know what these terms mean. So, although we can't feel it, all the air around us is pressing down on us and giving us air pressure. And changes in the air pressure bring about changes in the weather. So low air pressure brings with it very wet weather, and high pressure brings with it very dry weather. So what's the difference between the two? Well, if the air pressure is high, it's because the air is getting colder. It means the air is sinking. So you will notice in the air pressure that's high, all of these little air bubbles are very, very close together. So they make a very compact atmosphere, which causes them to sink. As they sink, they get heavier, and with them they bring cold air. Now, how is this different from low pressure? Well, low pressure, you will notice that all of these little air molecules are further apart. Now, because they're further apart, they're not as compact, they're not as dense, so as a result, they are lighter and they rise. Now, if air is rising, that means that as it rises and goes further into the atmosphere, it can cool, condense, and create clouds. So air that has low air pressure, it means that the air molecules are very far apart. So they go high into the atmosphere. As they go higher, they cool and condense and make rainfall. Whereas areas of high pressure, because these air molecules are very close together, they sink, and as a result, they don't bring any rainfall with them. So, this image, is it high pressure or low pressure? Well, first of all, you can see that the sky has no clouds in it, and we only see clouds if the air is rising, cooling and condensing, and making clouds. So if we can't see any clouds, that suggests that this is an area of high pressure. This one then, is it high or low pressure? Well, you can see here these little droplets are rain, and there's lots of clouds in the atmosphere. Now remember that in order for clouds to form, the air needs to rise, it needs to cool and condense and make clouds. And we only see clouds occurring in areas of low pressure. So this must be an area of low pressure. So why does low air pressure bring rain And why does high air pressure bring none? Well, what you will notice on your activities for today's lesson, you need to work through these following statements. So we're going to do it together now. So you might want to watch this whilst you are completing task 3. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do is, with a red pen, add the equator line. Now remember that the equator is found equal in distance from the North Pole and the South Pole, and it's at 0 degrees. So once you've drawn on your line, you need to label it equator. And then the next thing we need to do is draw on the Tropic of Cancer with an orange pencil, and that's roughly 23.5 degrees north. And the Tropic of Capricorn, which is 23.5 degrees south. And then label these: Tropic of Capricorn, Tropic of Cancer. Hopefully yours looks a little bit more neater than mine. Okay, so with a pen or a pencil, on the left-hand side of the map, we need to write down the next sentence. So this is number 3. Write this sentence near the equator. Hot air rises above the equator. This means as air rises, water vapor cools and condenses and forms clouds. So the air is rising. As it rises, it cools and it creates clouds. Now I'm drawing because I don't have a lot of space. Okay. Now, if there's lots of clouds and lots of rainfall, are we going to have tropical rainforests or are we going to have deserts? So if you're not sure the difference, you might want to Google, but think about deserts. Deserts are very dry and very hot, whereas tropical rainforests are very hot but very wet. The next task then, so this is an area here that we've just drawn of low pressure. So the air rises, it cools and condenses. But now we need to show where we find areas of high pressure. So what happens as the air rises, it moves. So it's either going to move north of the equator or south of the equator. Now remember that as it moves north or south of the equator, all of these particles get very, very close together. They're very compact. And because they're very compact, they start to sink. Now, as they're sinking, remember that they're going to be getting warmer as they go back down to Earth. So if they're getting warmer, that means they won't be able to rise, cool and condense. So with them, they bring very dry weather. And the same thing happens on the other side of the equator. So if once that air has risen from the equator, if it then goes south towards the Tropic of Capricorn, remember that all these molecules start to become very compact together, which means they're very heavy, so they sink. So heavy equals that it sinks, and as it sinks, it gets warmer, so it can't condense. So if it's getting warmer and there's no rainfall, it means areas of the Tropic of Capricorn and Cancer are going to be very dry. So you might want to draw here your cacti. Okay, so just to recap, on the equator we have very low pressure. So low pressure is when the air is very light, so it rises. So low pressure, it rises. And along the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, we have very high pressure. So at high pressure, the air sinks. And as it sinks, it's not able to cool and condense, so we don't get any rainfall. And that is why we know now that low air pressure brings rain and high air pressure brings none, because high air pressure sinks, so it's getting warmer instead of getting colder, whereas low air pressure is rising, so it's getting colder as it goes into the atmosphere, which allows it to make this condensation of clouds, and then it will rain. So once you have drawn this and you've completed the tasks for task 3, you now need to do this. So decide whether these are most likely to be statements of high pressure or low pressure. So let's do a couple of examples together. If the air is rising, then I would say that was an area of low pressure. It's low pressure, which means it's lighter, which means it can rise. If it's rising, it's able to cool and condense. And if it can cool and condense, that means it's an area of low pressure. Now, if the air is sinking, that's because it's heavy and dense, which means that's an area of high pressure. It's sinking. Okay, so you go through and you complete the rest, and then make sure you keep your notes somewhere safe, because in your next lesson you will be completing a quiz and you will be asked questions about high and low pressure. Good luck with the lesson, and if you have any questions, please make sure you send me a message on It's Learning, or also re-watch the video and have a look at the independent research links to help you.